Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast for another episode. In today's episode, I'm joined with Sam, and today is going to be a really interesting conversation. It's going to be it's going to be quite good because we're going to be speaking about different things from autism to ADHD. It's going to be a really good conversation, and it's going to be really cool because Sam reached out. I think it was last week. I think, well, if I'm right, Sam.
I think so.
Yeah, and Sam wanted to come on the podcast. And yeah, it's going to be a really good conversation. So Sam, for if people don't know who you are, would you mind just doing an introduction of yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my name's Sam Young. I reached out to Mason originally because I have ADHD and really passionate about neurodiversity. And I'm the director of a virtual enrichment school for students who have different strengths and different struggle areas who are neurodivergent or differently wired.
Yeah, I think that's really cool because I think like from your email and for a little while we were talking before we started the episode like you were saying that like about being it's important when you're neurodiverse because maybe we're from a children or or students point of view from them if they have some sort of neurodiverse themselves and they know like you do too it kind of I guess it's a comforting in a way because they know you can understand a little bit.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of this idea. Like so many of our students are often they're put in an environment where they feel like there's something wrong with them, right? And I think that the two key ingredients to helping them not get over that, but like work around that is that when they can, like what you said, Mason, when they can look up at adults who are similar to them, they might be kind of quirky and bright in the way that they are. And then when they can look over at other kids who are like them and they can realize that there's nothing wrong with them. They're just different from who they've perhaps been exposed to, and that they're like another group, so they kind of fit in with others and just kind of been out of context or a fish out of water, so to speak.
Yeah, it's very important like because it's hard to predict what a school's going to be like till you've actually been there because we're all going to have different experiences, like some are going to be good, some will be bad, um because it's all depend. I think it's all how people talk to you. I think it's the massive key when we go to school and stuff. From our experiences and from experiences now, maybe teaching. Like I think it all, especially when you're neurodiverse. I think it's very important when how someone speaks to you.
Yeah, and there's a large issue, which really is the reason that we were created. Young Scholars Academy was created is because so often we're focused on like bringing the bottom up. Like we're focused on like you and I were talking before the episode, like we need to help people where they're struggling. And that's, well and good, but I think a big focus, like a societal focus that I hope we can make is helping people develop their strengths first, right? Focus on the things that we're interested in, we're passionate about. Because, if I'm bad at math, let's say, like helping me get a little bit better isn't going to really move the needle for me, for my life, or for society. But if I'm really good at speaking, let's say, and you help me develop those skills, it's going to make me feel better. It's going to make me have a better experience in school, and it's going to make for a better, probably, society beyond.
Yeah, definitely. And I thought it's really important when we talk about that and talk about being that you're good at it and not saying that you're bad at it. Because like for this about like you said about maths, for example, I find I've said this a lot probably on other episodes, but I always bring this point up because it's very important. And I say that like even in my experience, and probably other people share that experience too, is where it might not just be math, it might be any lesson that we're not very good at. Most lessons really. So say we do maths, and one week we're doing algebra, and then the next week we don't do algebra anymore. We're on to times tables, and I find like with our neurodiverse brain, everyone's is different. Like some may be wired to know that knowledge all in one go, but it's very hard, isn't it, just to move on, and then you get your. I think it's all the thing about schools. Not all schools, but some schools they always focus around like even when you're not in the exam year when you're supposed to have your tests every year they'll say you've got the exam and so time you've got the exam. It's more focused around that exam than that learning anyway, I find.
Yeah, and it doesn't have quite this the staying power. I mean, I think taking exams is an important skill. It's a
Yeah,
part of life, but it certainly shouldn't be the focus of education, right? That we're just prepping to do some standardized tests, which again is pretty specific. It doesn't really allow, I don't know if you've ever seen this. There's this comic that I love, and it's like a bunch of different animals lined up at a teacher's desk. And there's like a goldfish, a monkey, a dog, a cat, a pigeon, and the teacher's at the desk, and there's a tree in the background, and he says, "All right, first animal." No, he says, "For today's test, you must climb the tree." It's like, well, the goldfish can't do that, right? The dog can't do that, right? But it doesn't mean they're not good animals. They have incredible specific skills, and we love them for that. But when it comes to education, we want everyone to climb the same tree and do the same thing. And it's a bit outdated, right? So it's time to make a shift so we can, yeah, allow people to develop certain skills, but also develop the things that are specific to them that are going to help them be fulfilled, feel good, and live their best lives.
yeah, yeah, and I found that it's very important because like I've had the I wouldn't say the joy of I'd say I've had two experiences where I experienced that maybe teachers that are trained within to teach people with autism or ADHD and people who aren't, and there's a massive difference. Although not all people that who are trained in it, I wouldn't say they're all good. Like like there are bad experiences that people have in a school maybe that is for people who are neurodiverse. There's not always going to be the good experience where because it's much better though. It's very much better for to have people that understand you, but they're not going to understand you properly because they're not you. So what that experience was. So let's say an experience where people don't know about well they say they do but they don't properly understand it, and that was a public mainstream school I went to first of all. And what happened was is I'll say one experience because I'd be here all day saying all the different type of experiences and bad experience that you could have here. So one of them was um it's probably the one of the most memorable ones is getting changed for PE, and they say you've got 5 minutes to get changed, and then after 2 seconds, that changes to 5 seconds. 5 seconds you get changed, or else you're locked in the changing rooms. And at that moment in time, I took it very serious. So I was getting changed, even trying to get changed outside the change room, so I wasn't locked in. And then they say that was a joke. So that isn't a joke, maybe to them, but it's a very bad joke, especially that you focus on your way of your talking. If you're laughing, you kind of maybe feel that's a joke, but that person took it really seriously, like and stuff. So that's one experience there, and that there can be the odd good experience I had there was maybe I liked a few teachers, and me and this maths teacher were leaving on the same day, so we were happy about that, and I actually liked that maths teacher. But in let's say special school, I don't like to say the word special school because I don't like to say that, but a school that with people who are neurodiverse, let's say. And the experience that I had here had very good experiences, so lots of people understand me better. But one thing that happened once is I got told to go to lunch because we were doing this practicing for an art exam. And I just went to eat my lunch, not thinking that's not what you meant. You actually meant go out to play and get ready to get call for your lunch. And me and these staff were having a discussion saying, why am I here eating lunch? And I said, because I got told to have lunch. And then, little story short, I end up going to my form tutor and I explain the whole situation. And then I end up getting teachers autism training, even though they have the autism training anyway, but just better autism training. So it just proves that there are, even in schools that have neurodiverse people, there's still things that do need to be worked on.
Yeah, there's definitely, I think you bring up a good point, which is that, you know, there's so much diversity in the neurodiversity space, right? And we can have it can be like a false dichotomy. You can have teachers who have like official training, but they're not necessarily the best, right? And then we can have teachers who have had no formal training and they're just intuitively incredible. Maybe they're parents that of differently wired kids. They're differently wired and neurodivergent themselves. And so I think that I often joke that the credentialing system is broken, right? So it doesn't necessarily matter if they pump someone out from their system. Yes, they might be exposed to different ideas and so forth. That's not the end all be all of what makes a good mentor and what makes a good educator. And something else you mentioned, Mason, which I think is really important, is someone could have the training but not necessarily know what's going on. And there's a saying that I like a lot in the autism community, which is once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
Yeah,
And it's really important to understand how different people are and how their neurology is different and how they're going to act differently in different settings because of different directions. And it's really important to try to think through as much as possible, not just what we're saying, like in the PE example, but how we're saying it and how it could be understood, and then checking for understanding.
yeah, yeah, and it is what it is annoying, really, that people don't always understand. And like you say, I think there needs to be just a massive change with like education system as well. I think it's very bad. There's not like a lot of people find it hard to have support with autism, and even get into a school that suits them. I find because like and you have to explain yourself a lot of the time. Really, if you have autism, and it is hard. It is hard to explain it sometimes because it's easier if we're speaking to someone that know, like me and you. But if you, well, it's always hard to explain it to someone you don't know, who may know what it is, but they may not. So that's always the fear sometimes.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, I think you said earlier, like we're moving in the right direction. I think that there's a lot more awareness generally, and I think people are becoming more understanding, especially with, and it's kind of controversial, but like social media has helped in some ways, in that there's a more general awareness. Of course, there's bad information out there as well. And always be skeptical of everything you watch and hear and listen and read. But I think that across the board, there has become, especially during COVID, I think people spent more time with themselves and more time with their kids. And there was sort of an awakening that happened with understanding the way, we've been kind of in a lull, right? We've been sort of asleep for a long time before COVID. You got your kid to school at an early age, and then every day they're in school 8 hours a day or so. It's not really a lot of time together. I mean, I often joke that I spend more time with some people's kids than they do because they're in our program, they're in classes all day. It may be, if you break down the numbers, it may be true. And I think COVID changed things in many ways because it allowed a lot of families to both see their own kids under the microscope and also maybe see themselves, as the routines change, and a lot of things that can be quite upsetting for people in the autism community. And kind of observe that and maybe came to some conclusions like, hey, we should maybe look more into this, or maybe use some testing, or even just starting to ask questions. Are these behaviors perhaps indicative that we could intervene and support some way?
Yeah,
And I think it was a big awakening.
definitely. Especially since since 2020, early 2020, where it's very hard, wasn't it? It was a very hard time for a lot of people, a lot of autistic people, because it was very confusing as well, with certain guidance it was like a yo-yo really. You can do this for a certain period of time, and then you can't do that anymore. You can do that, so it was very confusing, and especially like with a lot of, I guess, children's mental health would take a big impact on that, because you're used to going to school and then all of a sudden you've got to stay in and it's lockdown, so you can't go out. Well, why can't I go out? So it's very hard because no one expected to be in this position, but really I'm not surprised we are, because from a medical point of view, to someone who has a condition that has to be healthy and stuff. I always watch. It's quite funny because I'll go to different places and I'll watch what people are doing, in a sense of, are they being hygienic or not.
Mm.
So for example, last year, well, not last year, with the football, I like football, so I would go to the football and I'd wait till it's safe to go out where not many people were going out. And I was watching because they would have there was a burger van opposite me, and then you have the ketchup, you have the mustard, you have all that, and then everyone's touching it. Like you can picture how many people are going to touch that, but not only that, that they're going to eat it. They're going to eat their burger straight away, not even wash their hands. Not even considering that everyone's going to touch that um ketchup that they're pouring onto their burger or hot dog. So yeah, that's one of the things. That's only one of them, and then you've got the escalators. That's even another thing. How filthy that things get. But I'm not surprised we were in that position, really. But it was upsetting because it didn't. It still does impact people now.
Yeah, it's it quickly we forget, I think during the pandemic we were sort of like a pendulum, I guess, where we went one way and we really made sure that everything was, locked up and squared away. And I think for some people, it sounds like maybe you and others, we kind of came out of this thing with an awareness of how, some changes we can make, some things we want to pay attention to. And then I think for others, it's just kind of like, all right, back to the way things were.
Yeah.
And I think for some, it's kind of hard to ignore that. I mean, I certainly can't imagine getting on an airplane nowadays without a mask.
Mm.
I've just committed that for the rest of my life. That's just how it's going to be. I don't want to be in recycled air, and there's just certain things that have affected us. And I think especially for those of us who are, in the neurodiverse space, certain things the change is harder and it can be a bit shocking. It can be a bit harder. In my group of family and friends, I was probably one of the last people to still go out to big group gatherings, and I'm still even a bit reticent. Whereas some people couldn't wait, day one, they're ready to get back at it, and I thought, there's a bit of trauma and fear around that for me.
Yeah, it is. I think anyway, it can be a thing that we don't like to do, like being neurodiverse anyway. Going in like large crowds and in gatherings because it isn't like it is very weird because I will say I don't like that to maybe some people I do, and then they'll say that I can go to a football match where there's lots of people and watch the game, and they'll say, well, why can't you go to a concert? Because it is, I think sometimes things are a bit different for how we like them. But yeah, I have recently I have risked doing things that I like to do just because we still have to live a life and do the things we want to do. Um, like I've 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 started doing that more lately, but it's just that like it has impacted the neurodiverse community to doing things, but um like playing, for example, it's probably one of the worst things, because it's very impactful and so many people around you. But I would probably prefer a plane than a train.
Mm.
I would, especially an underground train. I don't like the underground trains. I don't like the noise to the underground trains. That's the most annoying thing to them.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely. And again, you bring up a good point about like, stimuli, right? And different people's experiences with different stimuli. Going back to the education conversation from earlier, it's really important, I think, for educators and so forth to have an understanding that certain students are going to be, really sensitive to processing certain sounds, certain feelings. Um, I've worked with over thousands of students, and many of my students, especially those on the spectrum, might wear the same clothes each day because the textures are comfortable for them. And even if they buy 10 versions of the same t-shirt, or I had students who would attend my class with professional like construction grade head earmuffs to protect their ears from sounds because they're really sensitive to the way in which they're processing these sounds. And things that some might be able to ignore might feel like like a dagger in their leg. It's something that just is so impossible to ignore. And so it's important to develop this understanding that we need to make places more accessible. And I think when we think about something you said earlier about like the way school is, we also need to make sure that autistic people and neurodivergent people have more like say and more agency in the way in which society is being constructed. You know, can we make workspaces more accessible? Can we make school spaces, public spaces more acceptable? And I don't even acceptable isn't necessarily a good goal, but like it's a good start. You know, can we make places that are really allowing people with autism, let's say, to access everything that everyone else does, just in maybe a different way, and thrive in that place.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's something that needs to be looked at, because like you'll find, well, I've like everyone is a different, I guess, how they teach and what they do. So some teachers will like to have absolute silence when they're speaking, and then they may not know. I found I've had this experience where I found it annoying when my actual teacher wasn't in, when I was at school. So say my teacher was not in, and we did not know. We didn't even get told that a supply teacher will be here, and so I think it happens to maybe a lot of people in school where that has happened, and then you'll find the teacher has no idea about anyone. They've just come in and they don't know what they're if they're on the spectrum or not. So, and then they'll just point at you and say, "Can you answer the question? Can you answer the question? Can you read? Like you do that?" And then you'll find that it may cause for a meltdown, perhaps for a person that is neurodiverse. And then I found the helper teacher, like the assistant, do more and actually tell the teacher that about the students, which I find that can be a hard experience because you're having someone you don't know, um, and it's all kind of sudden. You're not kind of preparing for that day.
Yeah, you know, something that we do is sort of like the university model, which is, you know, if the teacher's out, the class is canceled, right? But the difficulty is because you're right, there's a lot of context, there's important relationships, and a lot of our students don't do well with surprise change. Um, the challenge is what do you do in a classic day school, right? Because one of the big responsibilities, you know, if we're being honest, is supervision and daycare, right? No matter the age, whether you're 8 or 18, a lot of schools are, you know, you're in the seat and they're looking out for you. And what do you do, right? What do you do in that situation? It's a challenging one because they're legally responsible for you, and not everyone has the luxury to do what we do or what a university might do, which is just cancel class and we'll see you next week. So it gets difficult because what do you do with an 8-year-old? Let's say if you have to shut down a class, you know, you can't just say, all right, well, you know, we'll see you in an hour for your next class. So it's sort of these dual responsibilities of, and I think that was another big awakening from COVID, right? It's like, what
Yeah,
are we looking for in school? Is it truly just to like keep kids' butts in a seat, or are we trying to open their minds? It's kind of been both for some time. Can we maybe reassess, redesign, and go back to it a
yeah.
bit differently?
Yeah, and the funny thing, if like it's good that you cancel the class, like if teachers, and then, but at the same time, like you can just imagine those the students like who are okay with that because like there will be neurodiverse students will be okay with that, and that in their mind they'll probably be thinking, oh, well, I'm here for this class at this certain time, I'm waiting, and then they'll may possibly may have a meltdown saying why is it cancelled? It's in my time. I'm supposed to be here for this time. What am I going to do for the next hour?
That's
um,
right. Yeah. It's sort of a difficult bind either way. Because we are 100% virtual, what we typically do is we'll email our families in we seldom cancel last minute, but if we have to, if there's an emergency, we'll email our kids and say, hey, we'd like you to continue working on the project during that time period, just like you were in class. You know, so they're not necessarily coming together, but they're hopefully making that shift into, you know, let's say they're taking like World War II weaponry or something, you know, and okay, we're not going to meet today, but we'd still like for you to research your project and be ready to present, you know, on X date.
yeah, yeah. So with Young Scholars Academy, has that just been going since COVID, or is that where it started from all the
Yeah,
lockdown?
yeah, exactly right. So I started at the school called Bridges Academy, which was really probably like the flagship school, the first school to teach. I specialize in a specific population called twice exceptional. So these are students who have dual exceptionalities. They have an exceptional strength area and then usually maybe a struggle area. So they could be like have ADHD, let's say, and then like a really high IQ. And so the school that I worked at was really kind of the first in, and I was preparing to leave the school right before COVID, and I was going to start like a micro school, a really small 16 student, like classic schoolhouse model. And then, as you said, COVID hit, and so we kind of pivoted. I was like, well, I don't know what to do now. But families were asking me like, hey, would so and so doesn't go to your school, but could you teach an extra debate class for them, or could you teach the cryptocurrency class? Because my whole model was always school's outdated and we really need to change the way in which we teach and what we're teaching. We're teaching, like you said earlier, like algebra, but we're not teaching like financial literacy or investing or,
Right.
debate to young kids. So we very much kind of, it was just me teaching classes. And then, yeah, COVID hit, I went online and then started doing a bit more and a bit more. And then eventually got to a point where people were asking for things that didn't really make sense for me to teach because it's not my specialty. So I brought on these amazing teachers that I knew. And that was, 2020. Yeah, 2020.
Yeah, it sounds a very good idea because I think with being virtual you have more time for like the students rather than even going in. And it's a fantastic idea, and of course it's 2023 now, so it would have expanded a little bit since 2020.
Yeah, we've got about give or take like 130 families. We have um, about 12 or 13 teachers at any given time. And yeah, the goal is really like, again, strength-based learning, right? So can we move our students? So often the conversation is about like it's based on the medical model, right? It's like your kid's not doing X, your kid needs to be doing Y. Let's fix them, fix them, fix them. And that leads to a lot of really harmful self-image, right? Like I'm broken, I'm not doing what they want, I'm stupid. And so what we try to do is shift our kids into the light. Because I spent a lot of my life here, and I don't know if this resonates with you, but even as an adult, I have the sort of trauma from just like I've spent a lot of my life feeling like I'm stupid, I'm a bad reader, I'm not productive, I can't get things done on time. And and so I really committed myself to creating a facility that would allow students to develop their strengths and feel good about
Yeah.
what they do and who they are.
Yeah, definitely. I can agree with that. Like, when I was younger, I would always think that I was dumb at certain things, and like maybe especially maths. Like I would be that person in a class that tried to copy everyone else's work. I would look over, and people say it's copying. It's not. It's just getting that work done to say you've done it. Because if you're not getting any help, like you would ask for help, and the annoying thing the response that I would get is try again, and then like you wonder why you ask for help because you don't get it, because it's sometimes I think teachers can be lazy, that they'll just there for a day out maybe.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, try, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, we want to help creativity and stuff, but if someone's stuck and they're advocating, it's like, we have to, trying again, if it's not working is like the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah,
So we need to help our kids come up with different solutions, sure, but we need to help them get them started, even if it's just the first little bit of momentum so they can stay in movement.
that's it. And like the one thing I think a lot of schools have struggled for a lot of time is because towards the end, like making a good transition for a child from school to like college or whatever they want to do next, because I know a lot of kids struggle and they don't have any guidance. Like that, you do your work experience, that's all well and good, but they don't actually have a, and like for sort of certain like housing, like talk about rent, talk about mortgage, and not a lot of that stuff actually gets mentioned in like maths and stuff. Like if it did a little bit for me, very little, very little, but I think they need to speak about more about maybe the future, like because all this stuff is the future, and more focusing about what's happening next rather than focusing in, like we said earlier, about that exam that's in 2 or 3 years time or something. Because we're all, if you, we're always practicing for some exam, but like life is kind of an exam really, like all the different stuff we're doing. our own personal one. But yeah, I always think that we just think about the future more, what's going to be happening next, rather than just thinking about preparing for that thing that because that makes being neurodiverse makes it a little bit more anxious, doesn't it? Because you're kind of what you're kind of looked at to do this exam and complete it and do it and everything.
Yeah, you know, I certainly didn't invent the saying, but I like it a great deal, which is the idea that we're like square pegs in round holes, you know, and
Mm.
it's like education is really outdated because it's still trying to stuff us in those holes, and there's a huge gap between like what we're looking for as a society and what schools are doing. You know, at least here in the United States, I live in California. Um, our our education system is like 100 years old, and it was made to prepare people to go work in factories. Right? We're not really a factory country anymore. We're an intellectual country, and um, I don't know that we're setting our kids up for as you said, like the future or even the current workspace. And preparing for an exam where everyone does the same thing doesn't necessarily serve us well. We as a society value people who think differently, right? But the reason I like the square pegs and the round holes, it's like we're almost trying to like knock people's edges off, you know, which is really unfortunate because it's those neurodivergent people who, like, again, I live in Los Angeles, right? Like, what is the number one industry here? It's Hollywood, it's entertainment. And I can tell you who's in those writer rooms, who's doing all this content. It's usually neurodivergent people who have really bright brains and they make really interesting observations and
Yeah,
they can build beautiful stories around that can help us, you know, examine our own lives or get lost in cinema or television, you know. And so I think the education system is so outdated on this idea that we're preparing for tests. It's like it's forcing us all to think similarly and do the same thing when a society, our professional workspaces value different thinking.
yeah, and like it is annoying, I guess, from America. Like you've only got that entertainment kind of industry, which has been the main focus there, like with Hollywood. And like they're not, like with people on the spectrum and neurodiverse. Like it is hard, I think, to get any sort of job, isn't it? Like really, um, like yeah, I went a few years ago. I did this before COVID. I stopped because it stopped there, but I had to explain what autism was. No one knew really what it was, and I was very surprised. I literally said, "Are you joking?" But it's hard. It is hard, I guess, if you don't understand. But if you do, like, it's good. It's good. Like I always say, like 20 years ago, it's better where we are now than 20 years ago. Hopefully, that will be the same rhythm every 20 years. But we want to come in a way where people don't think that autism is bad, um, because it's not, and there's so many good things about it. Like we're saying about what we're good at, the positive things, hobbies. A lot of hobbies are always linked into what we do, um, because I think when you have your job and that kind of comes your hobby, you don't really want something that you don't like. Come home and say, I don't like that. I've just maybe cleaning, for example. I've just cleaned this house and I've had an awful day. You want something that really is you. So like it may be entertainment. It may be entertainment. It might be in the right workspace, but at the same time, just educating is kind of hobby as well, like what we're doing today. Like because we wouldn't be here if we didn't want to be talking about this, and like the more people like us out there, Sam, just talking about ADHD, autism, lots of different things too, the more people hopefully will want to hear, and the top people, let's say, in their education, want to make that change.
Yeah, I think it sort of goes full circle to what we said earlier, Mason, which is it's really all about the strengths and the interests, right? Like you said before, like I'm not really good at math, you know, spending our whole lives helping you get better at math. I don't know that that's gonna make a big difference in the world, right? But you here, you're incredibly good at bringing people together and having honest, frank conversations, and you're helping people every day with your podcast, right? So why would we spend our whole lives trying to fix your math abilities, when we could have had a class for you on podcasting or entrepreneurship or something that would help you reach even more people and make more meaningful contributions. You know, like that's the way you show up, and that's your strength, and it comes from an incredible place. And I think that we as a society need to, and I just gave the example of Hollywood because it's an easy one, but any
Yeah,
workspace benefits from being more inclusive, more accessible, and that's from the bottom to the top, so that we can, you know, live a better life and have a better society. And I'll say, you just reminded me of this quote that I love. I always say this. One of my favorite psychologists of all time in the gifted education space, this guy, Dr. Joseph Renzulli, he says, you know, no one cares about Einstein's ability to paint or Pablo Picasso's ability to do math, right? We just want them to do the one thing that we know them for, and we don't care about the rest. So why is education so focused on helping people improve the areas where they're not strong, instead of just helping them develop their strengths and talents?
yeah, it's crazy, isn't it? Like, it is crazy. Like, well, we're talking about maths again. Like with algebra, like that's only not every job in the world needs it. Like if you're working on computers, maybe, yeah, maybe. But everything else. So say if you're working at the zoo, I don't see where you're going to need the algebra unless maybe you're counting how many animals are in a pen, which you can do without, but hopefully. But yeah, there's so much around lessons that we get taught that we're not going to need, and it's annoying, really, because in certain job titles you that maybe don't even need it. You need a certain level in maths, maybe you'll need a certain level in English, and it's annoying, really, because if you don't want to do that, you spend so long of your life trying to get these qualifications, and then they don't end up helping that much in the long run. So I think that's why a lot of people on the spectrum just try to do their own thing. Like if it's podcasting, if it's school, um, try to make it a better experience. I did at the start of the pandemic. Actually, I did a program with young people. Kind of part of this organisation called the Mighty Schools Council. Basically, what I was getting at is I with the Mighty School Council, I did this confidence building program where it boosts confidence for young people. So we're doing different tasks each week. It was at the start of the pandemic, so we finished just before the lockdown. So that, and basically the whole point was of it is I wanted people to feel confidence that I didn't when I was younger. Because when I was younger, Sam, I always thought I was shamed because I have my autism. I didn't really know much about it when I was younger, so I decided to do this confidence program to help other people, and it worked well. I haven't done it since, but I would like to go back to doing something like that again. Um, at a school or something. It was at a school. It was at a school I used to go to, so it was very good. But yeah, I just wanted to say that as we're talking about like confidence and good at stuff.
I think that's so important. Again, it goes back to what we mentioned earlier. Just if you can help young people look up and see adults and say, like, it's going to be okay, I'm going to be okay, you know, and help them understand that there's nothing wrong with them, right? Like we're just different, and it's just we live on a continuum, we live different lives, and you know, it's always, I think you said, like, you know, it was difficult for you when you were younger because you felt like there was something wrong. And that's because we only really usually see one kind of, like, quote unquote right, you know. And so when we deviate from that, we can't help but feel like we're broken or something like that. And so the more people like you, Mason, that are out there talking, the more young people can look up and say, like, oh, you know, just like that guy. I
Yeah,
think that's so important.
thanks, Sam. That's very nice of you to say. Um, Before we finish though, Sam, I always ask every guest that comes on my podcast if you wanna share any of your information, like where people can find you, or just want to say a little bit of advice. I know you said lots of advice already, but if there's anything else you want to say, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I'll try to do both quickly. I think that the biggest takeaway that I always want people to have, I guess, when I speak, is just, if you can try to focus less on what you're not doing and focus more on what you're doing, and do more of that, that's going to lead to a more meaningful life. It's easy to think Teddy Roosevelt said comparison is the thief of joy. By human nature is quite natural to compare, right? We're competitive, we're all these things. So if we focus more on how we show up in the world and the things that we do well, it's the greatest thing we can do for ourselves and others. As far as getting in touch, if anyone's listening to this right now and you have a child yourself, or you have a family friend or someone who's looking for programming that would help them develop their strengths and help them feel good in the ways in which we've been discussing, you can just head over to youngscholarsacademy.org. That's youngscholarsacademy.org, and you can head over there and check out our different summer camps, and we have courses that run year-round as well. So we have programming all year for all different kinds of differently wired students, and we'd love to show up for your family and serve you.
Thanks, Sam. That's some great advice, and yeah. So everyone listening, watching, you know where to find Sam. And it's been a really good episode, just talking about ADHD, autism, and Sam's school. So I think it's been a really good idea, especially for people that have missed out on a lot these last couple of years. Well, especially with education, which is very important. But thank you again, Sam. Thanks for reaching out. It's been awesome speaking to you, and I hope you've enjoyed it.
Mason, I'm a huge fan of the work that you're doing, and I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come here today and hopefully even just help one person out. It's such an amazing, box upon which you can speak to the world. So thank you for including me today.
Thank you, and I completely agree. I always say, well, whenever we do like a conversation or a podcast, if it helps one person, that's all we can do, and better to help one person than no person.
Absolutely. And you're doing it each day, so good on you.
Thanks, Sam.